At the center of this narrative is a reflection on a man introduced to audiences not as a traditional celebrity, but as someone stepping directly into the world of labor, discomfort, and unfiltered reality. The premise is simple yet powerful, an apprentice-like presence who does not command authority from a distance, but instead learns by doing alongside workers in real environments. This framing sets the tone for understanding Mike Rowe as more than a television personality. He becomes a participant in stories rather than merely a narrator of them. His early public identity was shaped by curiosity, humor, and a willingness to step into roles that many would avoid. Whether confronting physically demanding tasks or unfamiliar trades, he approached each experience with openness rather than performance. What distinguished him was not perfection, but presence, an ability to remain grounded in situations that were often chaotic or uncomfortable. Over time, this approach formed the foundation of a larger public discussion about work, value, and recognition. The idea of danger ahead becomes symbolic here, not as a literal warning sign, but as a metaphor for controversial opinions, unconventional career choices, and public misinterpretations that followed him throughout his career. While audiences often saw humor and humility on screen, the deeper story involved evolving debates about labor, education, media representation, and authenticity. This introduction sets the stage for understanding how a voice that once narrated others' lives gradually became a subject of interpretation, criticism, and cultural significance in its own right. Humble beginnings and early influences. Mike Rowe's early life is often described as rooted in ordinary circumstances shaped by discipline, education, and cultural exposure. Born in 1962 into a family that valued structure and learning, he was raised in an environment where communication and expression were quietly emphasized. His parents, both educators, encouraged curiosity and intellectual engagement, which influenced his early interest in storytelling and performance. As a child growing up in Baltimore, he was not initially drawn to fame or entertainment, but rather to sound, rhythm, and narrative expression. He demonstrated a natural ability to mimic voices and engage audiences informally, a skill that would later become central to his professional identity. School environments provided early platforms for expression, whether through choir participation or small theatrical productions. These experiences helped him develop confidence in front of audiences, while also refining his sense of timing and tone. Despite these talents, his early years were not defined by a clear career trajectory. Instead, they were marked by exploration, uncertainty, and experimentation across different interests. He was drawn to communication but had not yet defined the medium through which he would express it. This period of his life reflects the foundation of adaptability that later became essential to his career. Rather than pursuing a linear path, he accumulated experiences that would later converge into a unique professional identity shaped by voice, observation, and storytelling ability. Education, performance, and the development of voice. During his academic years, Mike Rowe pursued communications at Towson University, a decision that aligned with his growing interest in performance and media. His education provided him with structured exposure to storytelling techniques, public speaking, and the mechanics of audience engagement. At the same time, he continued to develop his vocal abilities through music and theater, expanding his range beyond traditional academic study. Training at the Opera Institute in Washington, D.C., further refined his control over tone, projection, and emotional delivery. Performing with groups such as the Baltimore Opera added practical experience in disciplined vocal performance, reinforcing the idea that voice could function as both art and instrument. However, his career path was not immediately defined by these achievements. He explored various opportunities in media, including small-scale commercial voiceovers and minor television work, gradually building a portfolio of experience rather than pursuing a single breakthrough moment. This phase of his life highlights persistence rather than instant success. He was often working behind the scenes, contributing vocally to projects without public recognition. These experiences shaped his understanding of narrative invisibility, the idea that voices can guide stories without being seen. This concept would later become central to his role as a narrator in major documentary programming. His education and early performance work together formed the technical and emotional foundation that allowed him to transition seamlessly into professional voice work, even before he became widely known to audiences. The unexpected breakthrough at QVC. Mike Rowe's entry into mainstream visibility came through an unexpected and unconventional opportunity at QVC, the home shopping network. What initially began as an experimental or even humorous audition quickly became a defining moment in his career. Tasked with presenting and selling everyday products live on air, he discovered a platform that demanded spontaneity, humor, and sustained audience engagement. Unlike scripted performances, this environment required adaptability in real time, often stretching segments into extended improvisational storytelling. Rowe's natural wit and conversational tone transformed what could have been routine product presentations into entertaining interactions. He developed the ability to speak continuously and engagingly about ordinary items, turning technical descriptions into relatable narratives. This skill became one of his most distinctive professional traits. Rather than treating the role as purely commercial, he approached it as performance art grounded in authenticity. Audiences responded to his humor, timing, and approachable demeanor, which distinguished him from traditional presenters. Although QVC was not considered glamorous within the entertainment industry, it provided him with critical experience in live broadcasting, audience psychology, and persuasive communication. It also reinforced his ability to connect with everyday viewers rather than elite or specialized audiences. This period marked a turning point where his voice transitioned from background work to a recognizable presence, setting the stage for future opportunities in narration and documentary television. The rise of a recognizable narration voice. Following his time at QVC, Mike Rowe transitioned into voice narration, a role that would define his public identity for years to come. His voice became associated with documentary storytelling, particularly in programs focused on industry, nature, and human challenge. Series such as Deadliest Catch and How the Universe Works showcased his ability to deliver calm, authoritative narration that enhanced narrative immersion without overshadowing the subject matter. His tone carried a balance of clarity and warmth, making complex topics accessible while maintaining emotional engagement. Unlike narrators who rely heavily on dramatic emphasis, Rowe developed a style rooted in subtlety and rhythm, allowing the content itself to take center stage. This approach made him a trusted narrative presence for audiences who may not have even known his face, but instantly recognized his voice. His success in narration also reflected his broader philosophy about storytelling, that the narrator should serve the story, not dominate it. Over time, his voice became symbolic of credibility in documentary television, bridging entertainment and education. Despite his growing influence in this field, he remained largely unseen, reinforcing the idea that some of the most powerful storytelling occurs without visual recognition. This phase of his career solidified his reputation as a communicator capable of shaping audience perception through voice alone, setting the foundation for his eventual on-screen transition to on-screen presence and dirty jobs concept. The opportunity that transformed Mike Rowe from narrator to on-screen personality emerged through Discovery Channel's concept for Dirty Jobs. Unlike traditional television development processes, the origins of the show were rooted in a spontaneous and unscripted experience on a sheep farm. During a segment intended to showcase agricultural work, Rowe participated directly in labor-intensive tasks that were typically unseen by mainstream audiences. This included physically demanding and uncomfortable work that revealed the raw reality of labor industries. The authenticity of his participation, combined with humor and resilience, caught the attention of producers who recognized the potential for a new type of documentary series. The concept evolved into a structured program where Rowe would travel across industries performing difficult, often unpleasant jobs alongside professionals. The goal was not to dramatize but to reveal the dignity of labor that often goes unnoticed. This marked a significant shift in his career as he moved from voice-only roles into physically immersive storytelling. It required adaptability, humility, and willingness to engage in unpredictable environments. The show's foundation rested on authenticity, allowing real workers and real conditions to shape each episode. This transition represented not only a career change, but also a philosophical alignment between Rowe's communication style and the lived experiences of working individuals. The structure and impact of Dirty Jobs. Dirty Jobs became a cultural phenomenon by focusing on industries and labor roles that are essential yet often overlooked. Each episode followed a consistent structure in which Mike Rowe would enter a specific profession, observe its processes, and actively participate in the work. These roles included wastewater management, mining, agriculture, sanitation, and industrial maintenance. The show's impact lay not in dramatization, but in visibility. It brought attention to the physical effort and skill required in occupations that rarely receive public recognition. Rowe's approach emphasized respect rather than judgment, often highlighting the expertise of workers rather than the difficulty of the tasks alone. The show also challenged conventional ideas about success by presenting alternative career paths as valuable and necessary. Viewers were exposed to industries they might otherwise never encounter, creating a broader understanding of how modern society functions. The authenticity of the format contributed to its popularity as it avoided scripted dialogue and staged outcomes. Instead, it relied on real interactions and genuine reactions. Over time, Dirty Jobs evolved beyond entertainment into a social commentary on labor value and workforce perception. It encouraged audiences to reconsider assumptions about dirty work and recognize the essential contributions of workers across multiple sectors, experiences in the field and physical challenges. Throughout the production of Dirty Jobs, Mike Rowe encountered a wide range of physically demanding and often hazardous environments. These experiences included working in confined mining tunnels, handling waste management systems, assisting in animal processing facilities, and participating in marine research operations involving dangerous wildlife. Each situation required rapid adaptation and a willingness to learn directly from professionals in the field. The physical demands were often extreme, involving exposure to harsh conditions, unpleasant environments, and unpredictable risks. Despite these challenges, Rowe maintained a consistent approach rooted in humor, respect, and curiosity. He rarely positioned himself as an expert, instead functioning as a learner guided by those who performed these jobs daily. This dynamic allowed workers to become the focus of each episode, highlighting their expertise and resilience. The unpredictability of the work created authentic moments that resonated with audiences, reinforcing the idea that real labor cannot be fully scripted or controlled. These experiences also deepened Rowe's understanding of the complexity and dignity involved in manual labor industries. Rather than portraying these jobs as undesirable, the show often revealed their necessity and value within society. The physicality of the work became a central narrative element, emphasizing endurance, skill, and adaptability. Public reaction and cultural influence of the show. The public response to Dirty Jobs was overwhelmingly positive, particularly among viewers who appreciated its focus on real-world labor and unscripted storytelling. The show resonated with audiences because it highlighted professions that are often overlooked in mainstream media. Many workers featured on the program expressed pride in their roles, noting that it was rare for their professions to receive national attention. The series helped shift cultural perceptions of manual labor by emphasizing skill, dedication, and importance rather than inconvenience or difficulty. At the same time, the show sparked discussions about whether it romanticized or oversimplified certain industries. Critics argued that it did not always address systemic issues such as wages, safety conditions, or long-term labor challenges. Despite these criticisms, the show maintained a strong audience base and continued to influence conversations about work and value. Its cultural impact extended beyond entertainment, contributing to broader discussions about education, career choices, and societal respect for labor. The show's legacy lies in its ability to humanize workers and elevate conversations about industries that sustain daily life but often remain invisible to consumers. The media persona and the weight of public interpretation. As Mike Rowe's visibility expanded beyond narration and reality television, his public persona became increasingly shaped not only by what he said and did, but by how audiences interpreted him. Media figures often evolve in ways that exceed their original intentions, and Rowe became a clear example of this phenomenon. What began as a grounded focus on labor and storytelling gradually turned into a broader symbol through which people debated education, economics, politics, and cultural values. His calm communication style, which was intended to de-escalate and inform, sometimes had the opposite effect in the public sphere, where short quotes and clipped statements were circulated without full context. This created a layered identity. To some, he remained the respectful observer of working-class life. To others, he became a controversial commentator whose ideas challenged established narratives. Part of this complexity came from the nature of modern media itself. Soundbites, social media reposts, and fragmented interviews often reshape meaning, stripping nuance from longer explanations. Rowe's tendency to speak in reflective, conversational tones made his statements particularly susceptible to reinterpretation. A single observation about education or labor could be reframed as a strong ideological position, even when his intent was more exploratory than prescriptive. As a result, he often found himself positioned at the center of debates he did not explicitly seek, where audiences projected their own frustrations or agreements onto his words. Cultural impact and the reframing of work in modern society. One of the most lasting effects of Mike Rowe's career has been the cultural shift in how manual labor and skilled trades are discussed in mainstream conversation. Before his rise as a television figure, many of the professions highlighted in Dirty Jobs existed largely outside public attention unless they were part of infrastructure failure or crisis. By bringing these roles into living rooms across the country, Rowe contributed to a gradual reframing of how essential labor is perceived. Jobs involving sanitation, construction, maintenance, and resource management began to be seen not as invisible necessities, but as skilled professions requiring knowledge, training, and resilience. This reframing extended into educational and career discussions, particularly among younger audiences and parents evaluating future pathways. The idea that success must follow a single academic route was increasingly questioned, and alternative vocational paths gained renewed visibility. Rowe's advocacy reinforced this shift by emphasizing dignity in all forms of work, rather than hierarchy between professions. His messaging did not argue against higher education, but instead pushed for balance, suggesting that societies function best when multiple pathways are valued equally. At the same time, this cultural impact was not without tension. Some critics argued that increased visibility did not necessarily translate into improved working conditions or wages for the trades being showcased. Others worried that the entertainment framing of labor could simplify complex economic realities. Even so, the broader conversation had undeniably changed. Trade schools saw renewed interest in some regions, and public discourse began to more frequently acknowledge the importance of infrastructure workers in everyday life. Ongoing legacy, reflection, and the unfinished conversation. The legacy of Mike Rowe continues to evolve, not as a fixed conclusion but as an ongoing conversation about labor, meaning, and communication. Unlike traditional entertainers whose careers are defined primarily by a body of work, Rowe's influence exists in a more fluid space where media, education advocacy, and cultural debate intersect. His projects after Dirty Jobs, including podcasting, narration, and foundation work, demonstrate a consistent return to the same central theme, the value of work that is often overlooked. Yet the interpretation of that theme continues to shift depending on social context and audience perspective. One of the defining aspects of his legacy is the way it resists simple categorization. He is not solely a television host, nor exclusively a commentator, nor strictly an advocate. Instead, he occupies a hybrid role shaped by changing media landscapes. This ambiguity is part of why his influence persists. It allows different audiences to engage with his work in different ways. For some, he represents a reminder of dignity in labor. For others, he symbolizes the complexity of public discourse in an era where communication is rapidly amplified and reinterpreted. Final reflection on a career built between storytelling and reality. Looking at the full arc of Mike Rowe's career, a consistent pattern emerges. Movement between observation and participation, between narration and experience, between public perception and personal intent. He began as a voice guiding others' stories, transitioned into a participant within those stories, and eventually became a subject of interpretation himself. This progression is not unusual in media, but in his case, it became especially pronounced due to the nature of the content he engaged with. Real labor, real environments, and real people performing essential work. What makes his journey distinctive is not simply the visibility he achieved, but the kind of visibility he created for others. Workers who were once background figures in society became central subjects of televised attention. Entire industries gained recognition not through marketing or policy, but through lived demonstration. At the same time, this visibility brought debate, as audiences and critics interpreted both his message and its implications in different ways. Controversy around education and skilled trades. As Mike Rowe's public influence grew, so did debates surrounding his views on education and skilled labor. He frequently advocated for a re-evaluation of how society values vocational trades compared to traditional academic pathways. His arguments centered on the idea that modern culture places excessive emphasis on college degrees while undervaluing essential trades such as plumbing, welding, and construction. He highlighted what he described as a, quote, skills gap, where employers struggled to find qualified workers despite high levels of college debt among graduates. This perspective generated both support and criticism. Supporters praised him for bringing attention to overlooked industries and encouraging practical career choices. Critics, however, argued that his position oversimplified complex educational and economic systems. They contended that higher education still provides significant benefits and should not be positioned in opposition to skilled trades. Rowe's advocacy also included scholarship initiatives through his foundation aimed at supporting vocational training. These efforts reinforced his commitment to promoting alternative career pathways. The resulting debate became a broader cultural discussion about value, success, and the meaning of work in modern society. COVID-19 commentary and public backlash. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Mike Rowe's commentary once again placed him at the center of public debate. He focused on the impact of shutdowns on essential and working-class industries, particularly those involving manual labor and service roles. His perspective emphasized the economic and social challenges faced by workers whose jobs were disrupted by restrictions. He questioned how long individuals could sustain livelihoods without income and highlighted the struggles of small businesses. These statements were received in contrasting ways. Supporters viewed him as a voice for working people, while critics argued that his comments downplayed public health concerns. The polarized environment of the pandemic amplified reactions to his statements, embedding them within broader political and cultural divisions. His neutral tone did not prevent interpretation through partisan lenses, and his comments were frequently used in wider debates about policy and responsibility. Despite criticism, Rowe maintained his position as someone advocating for workers rather than political ideology. The controversy illustrated how public figures can become focal points in larger societal conflicts, regardless of intent. Truth-teller or troublemaker debate. The question of whether Mike Rowe is a truth-teller or a provocateur remains central to public discussion about his career. Supporters argue that he brings attention to overlooked realities about labor, education, and economic systems. They view his commentary as grounded in observation and practical experience rather than ideology. Critics, however, suggest that his statements sometimes oversimplify complex issues or contribute to polarized debates. This duality reflects the broader challenge of public communication, where messages are often interpreted differently depending on audience perspective. Rowe himself has often downplayed the idea of being either a hero or a critic, instead positioning himself as someone who asks questions rather than provides definitive answers. His communication style, which relies on calm observation rather than confrontation, contributes to this ambiguity. The debate surrounding his role highlights the tension between storytelling, influence, and responsibility in modern media environments. Ultimately, his public identity exists in the space between agreement and disagreement, making him a figure defined as much by interpretation as by intention. Current work and continued influence today. Mike Rowe continues to maintain a presence in media, education advocacy, and public discourse. His podcast, The Way I Heard It, remains a platform for storytelling that blends historical anecdotes with cultural reflection. He also continues narration work in documentary programming, maintaining the voice that originally brought him widespread recognition. Through his foundation, he promotes skilled trades and provides scholarships aimed at encouraging vocational training. His advocacy efforts focus on reshaping perceptions of labor and highlighting the importance of practical skills in modern economies. In his personal life, he remains relatively private, choosing a quieter lifestyle away from constant public attention. Despite reduced television appearances, his influence continues through ongoing media projects and educational initiatives. His work reflects a consistent theme: the value of work and the importance of recognizing all forms of contribution to society. Rather than relying on spectacle, his current presence emphasizes continuity, reflection, and advocacy. Conclusion and enduring legacy. Mike Rowe's career represents a unique intersection of storytelling, labor advocacy, and media influence. From his early days in voice performance to his rise as the face of Dirty Jobs, his journey reflects adaptability and curiosity. His work challenged audiences to reconsider assumptions about work, success, and education. While his views have sparked debate and occasional controversy, they have also encouraged important conversations about labor value and societal priorities. His legacy is not defined solely by entertainment, but by the broader cultural questions his work continues to raise. Whether viewed as a truth-teller or a provocateur, his influence remains embedded in discussions about work and meaning in modern society.